Hello and welcome into another fantasy hockey video. This one is just like the defenseman video I made and the goaltending video I made for fantasy hockey. So if you haven't checked those out, please feel free to go and check them out. I'm just going to be going over the top 10 drafted forwards in NHL fantasy drafts through the Yahoo ADP this year and give my thoughts on where they're going, if they should go there. Now the top 10 is a very fragile area because it's very you're more than likely going to get a guy who is the best player on your team, but if you miss bad, it can really mess up your team. So you got to be careful with who you pick. That being said, I'd like to thank all of you guys who have subscribed in the last week. I've gone from like 236 subscribers to like 268. Really appreciate that. Please drop a like if you like these videos. It gets the video more recommended to other people, and I can grow that total even more. And we can just have more people to talk fantasy hockey with in the comments. Let's get into the first guy on the list. It's McDavid. You knew it. It had to be McDavid. And for good reason, too. This guy is the best player in the NHL. Look at his point totals every year. If he's healthy, he's probably in the top 3 point getters. And I don't think there's a single other guy you can say, if they're fully healthy, guaranteed top 3 in points. McDavid's the only one. He's the only guarantee up here, assuming health. You always got to assume health, though. And no doubt. You then get Nathan MacKinnon. I think there's a few guys you could say could be the second best forward this year. And I think Nathan MacKinnon has a very good shout at being the second best forward this year for fantasy hockey. Scores a decent amount of goals, puts up 90-plus points a year. Hopefully, obviously he's only playing 56 games this year, so I was going to say hopefully he can get 100, but not going to be the year for that because of that. But anyway, he can do great things for your fantasy hockey team. I personally have him ranked a little lower than this, but I don't think that's any reason, if you were high on Nathan MacKinnon, to pass on him here. Great player, 5th in points per games last year in the NHL. Finished 4th in fantasy points last year, I believe. If my note there, yeah, it says 4th. You can't miss with a Nathan MacKinnon, in my opinion, and definitely a good selection at 2. Someone who I would take over him, though, is going as the third forward at a 3.8. This guy led the NHL in points last year, put up 43 goals after a 50-goal campaign. Leon Draisaitl is a point getter, gets him for fun. He plays with McDavid on the power play, boosts his numbers a little bit, but Leon could do it on his own. I'm pretty sure he would be above a point per game, well above a point per game, even if McDavid was not an Oiler, because he is that talented. And the fact that he gets to play with McDavid just boosts him, in my opinion, to I would want him as the second forward off the board. If I was in charge of fantasy drafts, I'd be like rankings 1 McDavid, ranking 2 Draisaitl. Very dynamic. I don't think you can go wrong with Draisaitl in the top 3, and he's going at 3.8, so he's going around the third spot in most leagues. We then move on to Artemi Panarin, who is a surefire top 10 fantasy player this year, putting up above a point per game in his sleep, essentially. Around 30 goals, 60 assists the last few years. Just very consistent. He's got his point totals have gone up, or his point per game totals have gone up the last few years, so he's in his prime right now. No reason to think he won't be a top 10 player. And going at 5.5, this is very much a certainty. His health, he stays healthy. You don't really have to worry about injury. There's no injury concerns. Very good pick at number 5. Or as the fourth forward, he's the fourth forward. You then go to the fifth forward, who is Alex Ovechkin, and he is not going to end up in the top 10, in my opinion, when all things are said and done. Ovechkin, yes, he will be on that 40-goal pace that he's on every year minimum, but the assist numbers have been lacking the last few years, and I don't see any reason for him to put up better numbers than he did last year. I think Ovi is what he was last year, and he's going to just do the same thing. I think he's a borderline top 10 player, but when you're picking him at an average of 5.8, you want a guaranteed top 10 player, and I think there are 2 guys who are under him who are more of a guarantee this year than Ovechkin. I could be wrong on that one, but I just don't like the pick there at number 5. Number 6 is Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews could finish anywhere from 1 to 10, in my opinion, but I would like to assume if you get him at 7, which he's going 6.9, you are going to get a higher result than that, just because I think this guy can finish number 1 because of how much he puts the puck in the net. But I think you're probably looking at a guy who's top 5 in fantasy at the end of this year. The goal totals 47 and 70 last year, ridiculous pace. Should put up a good amount of goals this year. Should put up at least 30 in a 56-game season. Hopefully his assist numbers can go up. That's the one thing about Matthews that isn't the best for fantasy. He's not the best playmaker in the world. And yeah, he plays with playmakers to set him up. And, he's going to get assists because he plays with talented players on Toronto. But you'd like that assist number to go up. But Austin Matthews is a can't miss at number 7. Austin Matthews himself was ranked 6th last year. So, assuming health, why should you expect this very young player to do anything but score goals and be a top 10 fantasy player? Great pick at number 7 if you get him. Jack Eichel, another guy who I think could finish as high as 1 and as low as 10. But like Matthews, I think he's probably a guaranteed top 10 fantasy player if he stays healthy. 78 points in 68 games last year, 82 and 72. You're adding Taylor Hall to his line, which I don't think people are putting enough stock into when looking at that 9 overall ADP. I personally think for offensive purposes, I'd rather have him over Matthews because he can score 40 goals if he plays 82, as you can tell by his pace last year, but he can also probably put up above 50 assists and be like a 40-40 player, 40-50 player, 40-60 player even. I think the ceiling offensively for point totals is higher for Jack Eichel. I'm not going to get into the who's better debate because, defense, it's very much like what you think it is. It's hard to really argue for Jack Eichel in that category because of how bad the Sabres have been. But I think if the Sabres become a little better around Jack Eichel, you will be able to say he's just as good as Austin Matthews with certainty. I think people are just sleeping on Jack Eichel because of the team around him. But Jack Eichel, I expect to be a top 5 fantasy player this year and is a can't-miss pick, in my opinion, at number 9. We then go to Pat Kane, who I think is going to finish about around where he's going in these drafts. He's ranked 9.9. Pat Kane is a very consistent player in fantasy. Had that one season 2 years ago where he went under a point per game, but bounced right back with 110 and 81. And was having a very impressive points per game total last year with 84 and 70. Now, he's not the sexiest pick in the top 10 for the pure fact he's not a younger guy. There's always a risk of regression at it with an older player or a somewhat older player. He's only in his early 30s. He's not even that old. I think Patrick Kane is probably going to finish around the 10th mark, and if you get him on average at 9.9, you're probably getting a good player. Could finish a little outside of the top 10. Wouldn't shock me because Chicago's talent is pretty low. He's just outside of my top 10. You're going to see my top 10 list. If I had an 11, it was going to be Patrick Kane. But I just don't like what I see out of Chicago. If he gets traded, that would be amazing, in my opinion, for his fantasy stock. But just the team around him is pretty terrible because of the Jonathan Toews injury and the Kirby Dach injury. It's going to be him and Kubalik and DeBrincat and not much else offensively for upside. Maybe Boquist will emerge. I hope he does. I used him in my sleeper video for defenseman for Central Division, I believe they're in. Yeah, that sounds right. We then moved to number 9, and this guy they project to have a pretty big jump. He finished 23rd ranked in fantasy last year. Now he's going at 12.4, which this is a guy who I'd say has top 10 potential. Really does for forwards. Put up 38 goals, 28 assists. You'd like to see that assist total. He's had one season above a point per game. I expect him to be around a point per game, above a point per game. The goal totals, my league values goals a little more than assists, so rises up. I think he's a top 20 player. If I'm drafting you as a top 10 forward, I want that top 10 expectation. So I'm not sure about how I feel about Aho in fantasy. I think he's a great player in real life. I need to see him take another step, and I think he can. I have him in my top 10 over someone like Patrick Kane, which may be a mistake, but I think all the young players in Carolina are going to take a step forward this year, like Svechnikov and Aho, who play together quite a lot. So I'm projecting big things for Aho. I wish I could get him later. 12.4. I wouldn't say it's a bad pick. I just say for value, you're just drafting a guy who's probably going to finish around where he goes, which there's nothing wrong with that. 12.4 I think is a fine spot for Aho. We then go to Sidney Crosby, who I like a lot at this pick. 14.3. It's I play fantasy basketball this year, and LeBron James is going in the second round. I took LeBron James. He's been very good for me so far. This is kind of how I look at Sidney Crosby. Had injuries last year. They expect him to be fine. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on him because when you're in the draft, a lot of people look at last season's stats, and they're not going to see Crosby as high because of those missed games. So I think he slips a little because of that. He's not a young player. He's 33, but by no means is he an old player. 1 year removed from 100 points in 79 games when he did play last year above a point per game by a decent mark. You're adding a healthy Jake Gensel on his line for the whole season, which he did not have last year. So there's Pittsburgh's best sniper back on the team and back on Crosby's line. You then add Kasperi Kapanen to his line, who I expect to have a pretty good year with them. And I think you're looking at Sidney Crosby is going to put up well above a point per game and is a pretty good value pick for 14.3 because the floor is so high with Crosby that like you could be getting a top 5 player here, because he might go back to those 100-point seasons where you're just like looking at Crosby like, man, this is one of the best players of all time. He's only 33. I really need to stress that, like, he's not that old, and we have no reason to believe if he plays a full season he won't put up around 100 points like he's able to, and especially with Gensel back. I have to stress that. I'm big on Crosby this year at 14.3. That's everyone in the top 10 for forwards. Here's my top 10. Go over it really quick. I got McDavid at number 1, no surprise. Draisaitl at number 2. I'm going to project Jack Eichel and Taylor Hall do big things. I really think so. I think you're going to see Jack Eichel have his I'm one of the best players in the league statement season here. We then go MacKinnon at 4, I have him 2 spots below. Splitting hairs here. Just be aware of that. It's no disrespect to Nathan MacKinnon to say he's going to be a top 5 forward, in my opinion. Matthews will finish around 5 like he did last year. Panarin 6. Crosby 7. Aho 8. Braden Point, I think, will jump into this top 9. I think Steven Stamkos will stay healthy, and they will have a very dynamic line, and the power play in Tampa Bay will still be good without Kucherov, in my opinion. And then at 10, this guy's going a little lower on draft boards. He finished top 10 in fantasy hockey last year. Amongst all players, I think he's going to finish again. People aren't drafting him as high because he was labeled an injury the last few weeks, but it's looking like if he misses any time, it would only be a week, and I don't think that would hurt him too much in the fantasy points category. I'd want Marchand over a guy like Kane, just because I think the Bruins are a better team around him, and I think Marchand still has 2 more elite years in him. That being said, that is the top 10 for me. That is the top 10 for Yahoo. Those are my thoughts. Very, very subjective. Very subjective list here. I don't think many people are going to be happy with some of my picks here. Like, I think McKinnon at 4, some people are going to be like, man, he could be number 1, which he can. This is very splitting hairs. I really think this is a very tough year to pick after those first 6 picks, and I think you could be very right with other guys picking in the later half of the first round, early second round with these top 10 forwards. That being said, thank you for watching my video as always if you've gone to this point, and I will see you in the next one. Always consider hitting the subscribe button if you want to see my coverage going forward, and hit that thumbs up button if you like the video. It gets the video more recommended and shows the channel a decent amount of support. Peace.